Okay, we're recording. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Creative Conference. My name is David Bruckner, and I will be moderating, interviewing, asking questions today. This is not something that I normally do, so we will find our way through it. But this is Luke Piotrowski and Ben Collins. These are two fabulous, brilliant working writers here in Los Angeles that I am very fortunate to have several projects with as a director, and we together have a movie coming out on July 16th called The Night House that we premiered at Sundance in 2020. And yeah, but I guess you guys should acknowledge who's who.
Yes, yeah. I'm Ben. Nice to be here. Glad to be here.
That I must be Luke. I am.
Right on.
It's still weird. It's still weird when you say we have a movie coming out. Like it's such a strange. I was like shaking my head.
I was freaked out when he said working writers.
Yeah.
I don't know why. It's been a while now, but it is still kind of like, damn. Yeah, I guess so.
No, it's weird. It's still weird. It's still, there's a part of me that like it never. It either always felt like it was a thing that should have happened, or it just feels like something that's still a dream that never exists. You know, like it's kind of like both intangible in different ways. I don't know.
Yeah.
For me too, the imposter syndrome persists, no matter how far one gets into this. I should say too that we're all from Georgia. Is that correct? Or we all lived in Georgia?
We all grew. I would say grew up because
to various degrees. You were from Texas, Ben? Where are you?
No, I was born in Alabama and then moved to Fayetteville, Georgia when I was 5 years old. And Luke, you were born in Illinois, correct?
Outside of Chicago, yeah, and I moved to Fayetteville, Georgia, 1993. Summer of Jurassic Park, as I like to call it.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So you moved there like 3 years after, and we actually lived in the same, like we went to the same schools and stuff, but didn't really know each other until high school, where we went also in Fayetteville, Georgia. And then Dave, you're from.
We never crossed paths with Dave until you lived in LA.
Yeah, that's the weirder thing.
It was like at some Atlanta coffee shop, and it was like so weird because it was like Hollywood stuff is like, but oh wait, this guy's also in Atlanta.
It's very the Atlanta Hollywood connection is a strange one. I don't know how we should go into detail on that or not. But you were actually born in Georgia, right, Dave? Just to clarify for all three of us.
No, I was born in Miami, but I grew up in Georgia, and I went to UGA and came down, spent some time in Atlanta, actually 13 years in Atlanta after college making movies and stuff. And so we being, the group of creative cohorts I was a part of there, we did a movie in 2007 called The Signal, which kind of got us started. And then a few years later, we did a segment for VHS that was, that got me like, as a director, got me like agents and managers in Los Angeles. And I started interfacing a lot more with LA. But at the time I was still kind of split. Like, was I going to do it in Atlanta or was I going to do it in LA? And the tax incentive had just passed in Atlanta a few years previous. So the industry had started to swell up in Atlanta in a way that it never had before. So it was a real divide, but it was, we shared a manager. It was Nate Madison.
Have to mention, I can remember to this day, I was in my second apartment in Los Angeles, and it would have been, I guess, what year did VHS premiere at?
It was Sundance at 2012. So it was later that year. I was visiting LA a lot. So it was probably spring, summer of 2012.
I think when we met, but I remember Nate calling me and saying like, I got a director that you guys got to meet. And I was like, oh yeah, who? And he was like, this guy, David Bruckner from Atlanta. Like, do you know him? And I was like, no, why is the name familiar? And he was like, well, he did The Signal. And I was like, oh, that guy. And it was like, yeah, that's so weird that we haven't. And it was like maybe a month later or something, I think, that you were in town and we went and had beers, and Nate showed up and sort of made us be friends. And it was
I had this crazy crackpot idea for a movie that was like a haunt, that like a Halloween haunt that you get like incorporated in. It's like you go in and you see the players, and then you like never get out of the haunt, and then you end up becoming one of the players in some way. Yes. And Nate and I were tossing that around, and I remember explaining it to you, and your first reaction was like, you thought about it and you kind of picked at your beard a little bit and you went, that sounds really hard to get right. And it was And I remember being like, oh, this guy's not easy. Like he's coming out the gate with some tough love, and I like it, you know? And so like instantly I
That's
was
very
like,
funny.
I gravitated towards your criticism, and it just felt honest to me or whatever. And but yeah, we hit it off, and then several meetings. I mean, at the time, you guys were kind of, and this is just my perspective on it, so I'm probably missing something. Is that you had written this movie Stephanie, which was, I think that was the script that Nate first brought you on board for, or was it one before that?
That was the first one that Nate kind of like championed as our manager. He had read another sample of, or the first script we ever wrote together called The Second Sister. That was our first sample, and then Stephanie was sort of like our, I don't know, I guess, was that our second one, Luke, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of weird because you had a version of Stephanie that was like a very like sort of rough and abstract kind of tone poem that had no supernatural elements that you had just written by yourself. If I remember, you and I had written something together, this Second Sister thing, just passing it back and forth, almost like an improv game, but with screenwriting instead of, instead of acting. And you had gone out to LA and you had this sort of abstract version of Stephanie that you showed to, I don't know if it was to Nate or our agent Emerson, but somehow that had happened and they said, what else do you have? And I had not been working on that Stephanie. And the other thing we had to show them was Second Sister, which we had.
That's right.
And that sort of was like, okay, here's a representative of, you had to have that other thing to hand them. And eventually I ended up getting into Stephanie with you and did a pass, and we ended up, for a number of reasons, crafting Stephanie and became much more of a mainstream horror thing with a big horror hook. And, eventually that then movie goes on to get made. Second Sister has not. But that was the weird thing, was that, there was a draft of Stephanie that I didn't touch. And then I came on with you to kind of reimagine it.
Which is probably that's probably a cool thing to talk about. I don't know if we want to do it now, but like just the various different ways that projects get started. Because I do think I've said it before to people that I think probably, Luke, just you and I, like we've probably done every conceivable version of how to write a movie in terms of like, one of us does the first draft, the other the second, they'll like crack story together, outline, blah, blah, blah. Neither of us knows where it's going, both passing. It's like, there's so many different ways you can get to it because obviously, you're going to make it all right before you actually make a movie. So writing it can sort of be generated in a lot of different ways. And I do find that interesting.
I think that's a great thread to follow. I just want to frame it a little bit because it's not obvious. Like these guys write horror films, like this is, this is a horror podcast or Zoomcast or whatever we're doing here. So, but you guys were kind of rising at the same time that elevated horror became a thing. So it's like, the teens have been a really interesting evolution of genre films, where audiences are concerned. A lot of that's the rise of A24 and, I think just, really seminal movies like Get Out and the birth of the social thriller and all this kind of stuff. There's just a greater awareness right now where the audience is concerned of the things that you can do. And I think it gels really well with your sensibilities. But I think, like Stephanie was this script that was like, it was just a great read. It was like everybody passed it around, and I know when Nate gave it to me, he was like, what do you think? I was like, I'd love to direct this. And then you guys got bigger, more interested parties in it for a while. And so like, I couldn't get my hands back on it. And, but it was one of the first times I ever saw that thing of like how a really refreshing read that's doing something different can just get passed around town. Because everybody's so used to being in the grind, reading the same formulas, the same 3-act structures. And here was this movie that, not to give anything away, but you can. The first like 60 minutes, like alone with this girl in a house, dealing with some kind of abstract force that you didn't understand. And it was all from the perspective of this little girl. And so it just, it was such a unique experience, a unique read. But yeah, I mean, how do you guys want to go into the ways some of your movies have gotten made? And because you have how many projects have gone to screen now? 4, 5?
Four produced movies. Yeah. Night House is the 4th. Yeah, and then we've got. I guess we could say we have like 2 that are sort of prepping. I suppose now. So we've made a few. We've written a lot more than that. I mean, I don't even know how to make. We try to do that count every once in a while, Luke. We're just like, how many scripts have we written? And it's like, I don't know, 30, 35.
And then there's some that are like so thoroughly outlined. It's like we did everything but write the script. You know, we wrote pitch documents and had to. You know, that's the weird thing, especially with open writing assignments. When you start chasing things like that, is like you got to crack the movie in your brain. So in order to even do a pitch, it's sort of like, well, I have to decide how the movie begins and ends and how it gets to the ending. And that's the hard work, and that's the work that's always free. But
yep.
So I don't know how many we've written, but yeah, four that are real.
Yeah, and sometimes that's with directors, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's with producers and, you know, there's like every variation on it. But that'll be a fun thing because you're one of the first directors we ever, I think, truly developed material with, right, Luke? In terms of like actually like really Siren? Like diving deep, like from the beginning of something together. I think
so.
Yeah.
But that was Siren was an adaptation of a VHS short that really was something that, you know, I think worked in a 15-minute short, but expanding it to an entire feature film was to invite another world into it. I remember being really blown away by how much of a grasp you guys just had on like the occult and magic and the way that you could build out like a mythical universe in a pretty contained way, which is what it needed to be. But it just, all that felt super authentic. But that's the only one of the 4 movies that you guys have had produced that was based on any pre-existing material, even though I think you invented, you know, 95% of what Siren was. But like all 3 of your other movies have been original specs, right?
Yeah, that's true.
That's actually really rare, you know.
That is.
Well, it's even rare in our work because so much of our, like, the jobs we get at this point are, you know, adaptations of books or graphic novels or remakes of, you know, foreign language films or short films adapted to features. Like, there's so much of that in our day to day that it is kind of weird that the ones that have actually gotten made so far, it's like strange. I don't know.
Yeah, most of our time is spent chasing these other things, but the stuff that's gotten made has by and large been generated by us, which is, maybe that's a lesson we need to take more seriously.
I think so. I think we're trying to.
I was on the phone with Ben last week and I was like, when is the new Luke and Ben spec? Like, it's cool that we're doing all this franchise stuff now, but like, I think as a fan, I'm like, wait.
I think we've talked about what we think it might be, and it was. And I'm jumping all over here a little bit, but you know, that's the thing of like, that is what Night House was burnout of kind of going through the machine a little bit and working so much, because this Second Sister script that I talked about really was this improv game of trying to scare one another and just writing a scene and not knowing where it's going and sending it off and then seeing what you got back and then having to kind of just do that. But it was an exercise in trying to one up each other with like being scared, turning down the lights and putting on creepy music and writing at night. And Night House was an attempt to like, can we just do that again? I don't want to chase the Amityville remake or, you know, write this thing that this, you know, person has an idea for or whatever. And it ended up
or not get the job writing Hellraiser,
right?
Which there's a lot of that. Because it was like, you know, when you first get into this, you know, when you have a good sample and you get representation and you are going to all the meetings and stuff, it's like, they throw you into the pit with like other writers on like these, you know, horror franchise assignment jobs. And so like we were trying, we tried to get Amityville, we tried to get Halloween, we tried to get Hellraiser multiple times, like. And you just
which
like
you
Luke's
have
saying
now, and we're currently working on it, but it only took 10 years. But
I guess that's one of the ones that I said was in prep, and it's like it is weird to look back at it and go like, we tried many times, and every time you do that, like Luke's saying, it's like, okay, well, you got to come up with a story. It's not like you just walk in and be like, I want to do a Hellraiser movie, and they go, here you go. It's like you got to tell them an entire story that justifies your point of view on it and why your idea is the best. And like, so you're doing so much creative work that just goes straight in the trash as soon as they don't hire you. And then it's like, and so like, we basically picked through the trash bin of our own ideas and put together an original story out of Night House that was based on a lot of these things that we, you know, had put our heart and soul into for like a couple weeks at a time or something, and they didn't get. So that's a, you know, a good part of the process in terms of ideas too.
It's the weirdest art form in that you're only part of it. Like you're a screenwriter, and so you consider yourself an artist, but that your art is always a game of telephone. You know, it always is. I have an idea that is very pure, but you know, and I think it works with Ben and I, but there is a little bit of like, and this is sort of the weird dance of why it's sometimes difficult for us to come up with a spec, right? Because one person has to generate the kernel of the idea that you get possessive over. So the first person we have to convince is one of us, you know, that we can do the vision together, and we got to work through the filter of that person to do a team effort. Then we have to go through producers and executives that you have to pitch to, and then you get to a director who's now going to be conveying it to the performers. By the time, you know, it ends up on screen, it's like your thing. Sometimes it's so much better. Sometimes it's so much worse. Sometimes it's just so different that it's that the satisfaction of like, I could just go out there and, you know, like I did theater in high school, you know, and the satisfaction of going up there and here's my performance of Ali Hakim from Oklahoma, and that resonates with people and they're responding to that. And it's like, yeah, I get the charge. And this is like, I'm writing a message in a bottle that's going to be rewritten by 1 billion people. And if anybody ever even picks it up on a beach on some distant shore, I'm like barely going to know about it. Or by the time they do, the person that wrote that letter no longer exists. So it's like such a fucking crazy.
No, when you were describing that, it makes me think of like the comet on that episode of The Simpsons, that by the time it burns through the atmosphere, it's the size of a chihuahua's head. Right. You know, like that like the idea of this thing that's like this big thing that everyone's so terrified of, and it's like by the time it gets there, it's this. It's like, yeah, you start with the passion of like, I'm writing the greatest, you know, story ever told, and it's like, yeah, you know, it's a lot of whittling down, but hopefully it's still good, you know, so even at that stage.
So what, when you get, so you guys are, you're on the up and up. You got multiple movies that are now about to happen in addition to the 4 that you have produced. You're both like, I mean, you're really doing it. You're in the, these would be the years when you look back, you'd be like, yeah, we were in the swarm of it. And so like,
weird.
But it is always just compromised to the nines, like in every single way. Like, you know, I know just on the director front, they say like, you know, day one is the day the movie starts breaking your heart, you know, and like, whether it be compromises of the realities of money and logistics, or, you know, trying to find cast, or movies not happening, or people meddling with the vision, or pitching your brains out on stuff that doesn't come to fruition. Like, how do you just on a personal level, like, stay excited? Like, is the experience alone of writing enough for you still, or is this a constant struggle, sort of? Do you feel like you have to carve out a way to do your own thing moving forward, or do you?
I think we will, and I think the bar moves. And then there's a weird hunger, and I mean, it's a lot of it is just a survival mechanism, and I think to some extent it's psychologically applicable to other things, not just writing. But like, I remember the day, you know, that you stay sane by just kind of like, oh, I can't worry about that anymore. I have to worry about this now. But I remember the days when we would first write stuff, and when you would hear another person say your character's name out loud, felt incredibly gratifying, because then it was real. Like, to have somebody else talk about, oh, well, when Ada does this, it was like, oh, you used her name, like that makes her real. And that was satisfying enough, you know. And then you get to the point when, oh, people are actually want my opinion on story. They want to listen to you. You're going to pitch to with Jason Blum in the room. And it's like, okay, this is the guy that, you know, Paranormal Activity. Like, all right, he's going to listen to me. Now that's fulfilling and exciting, you know. And then by the time you get to talented actors saying your dialogue, it's a whole other thing. And so I think that the bar keeps moving to where there's stuff that is exciting because there's always the next thing. And I think especially in this business, you can like, maybe it's time for us to start getting into producing and exploring that. You know, there's always the vague notion of directing on the horizon. And then there's also just the reset of like a new character that I've created and somebody saying that character's name for the first time. And there's still a little bit of that charge. And when you hear a new actor say these words, or embody that character, then it kind of is a cyclical thing I don't know if that answers your question, but
I think that you're probably right about that, and it's like, it is a little bit of the like, you know, that's how you get them hooked, kind of like drug dealer business mentality or something, that like this business does like exhaust you and zap your ability to like, you know, have dreams sometimes, but then at the same time it does keep giving you these little pieces, these little nuggets of satisfaction that kind of keep you hooked, you know, keeps you going. And that there is in theory always going to be like some new thing that you haven't experienced. Like I remember, I mean, I'm not gonna spoil anything, but on the set of Night House, like the exterior like overnight shoot that we were on, like the last day we were on set.
Oh yeah.
And like being outside with like the fucking condor thing, the big light that we had, and just like I was just like, well, this is new, you know. I was like standing by this body of water with this huge light and these actors and all this like atmospheric. You're just like, yeah, this, even that felt like a new charge. It's like, we're really doing this.
The Night House thing, yeah. I mean, that the trailer and poster just dropped, and this is our first movie that will be like sort of a more wider release theatrical. So that in and of itself is like, we have never had that before, and that's exciting. And there certainly is the like, well, okay, I just want to do the next one. Like, I'll do the next movie. But that's what I was talking about, that psychological protection thing, which is, it's not the best metaphor, but it described a little bit like, you know, losing weight or growing old, to where you don't know that it's happening. Every day you look in the mirror and you look the same. It's not until you see pictures from 5 years ago where you're like, holy shit, I look so young, or oh my God, I've lost so much weight. Like, it becomes, so like the script you wrote 5 years ago, now that movie is coming out. And again, there's a little bit of, you're not even that same person, but that is the psychological protection. You don't have the one thing that you're doing, and there are so many crushing defeats that, to go back to my messages in bottles, you have to send out so many, and you never know which ones are going to get a response, and you never know when that response is going to come. So you kind of do just have to like, I just did it, and I'm not going to think about that anymore. And if it ever comes back, great. And then it does, and you're like, oh my God, did you? And that's cool. But you have to have all those different ones, because some of them are just never going to come back, and that's how you kind of.
I mean, that is,
the surprise of the ones that you, oh shit, that thing, I forgot about that. Like,
I know the directing front, you really do have to kind of maintain a certain foolish optimism to even continue a lot of ways. You just like, half the game is just convincing yourself this is possible. Because if you knew 10 years ago how hard certain aspects of it were going to be, you probably wouldn't have activated, you know? So,
no.
But I'm curious if, so I'm imagining like, you know, that there may be folks out there who have a spec, you know, or they have several specs, or they have things that they're proud of that they're trying to get out into the world a little bit. Maybe it is helpful to talk about how, you know, those 3 movies got produced, since you know, only one of your 4 was like a job that was brought to you. Like, how maybe spend a little bit of time going into each one and just how it came together.
Okay, let me think, because it's, I mean, I think I'll just start talking, and Luke, because I think the first thing you said there, Dave, when you were sort of introducing us about like readability and the pleasure that people in this business get at just reading something that's fresh and interesting to them. And then it's like, there's a lot of misconceptions that people have about like theft. This is kind of a rant, but I'm just gonna.
Oh, this is a great point. Yeah.
Everybody's afraid that they're going to do something, that they are going to write something that's like so amazing that as soon as they share it with anyone, it's going to get stolen from them, you know? So like, I'm going to make something up. So like, you've got your amazing spec about, you know, a dog that's a detective, and you're going to show it to big Hollywood producer number 1, and the dog detective, make note of this. This is good. And he's going to read it, and he's going to say, nice work, kid. You know, you got a future, but not for me. And throw the script back to you. And then, you know, 2 years later, you're going to be walking up to the AMC in, you know, Riverdale, and you're going to see Dog Detective starring Tom Hanks, and you're going to be like, what the fuck? That was my Dog Detective thing. And it's like, I think the number of times that happens is like incredibly, incredibly low, if not almost never, because anybody who knows anything about how the business works knows that what you're gonna, like, the legal struggles, if you actually do that and get sued, it's like, that's such a pain. No one wants that. They would much rather, if they like it, they would much rather pay you for it and then hire a bunch of other people to make it more like what they wanted and kick you off. That's just how it works. So if your dog detective movie is amazing and you feel like it's amazing, you probably need to get it in front of as many people connected to the business as possible. And if they like it, they are going to want to, even if they don't want to make it or can't make it, if it's really good, they're going to want to look like the person who found the good script and give it to somebody else. And this is the way these things kind of get passed around. And it's like, you know,
I was just gonna say, also assume there's 15 dog detective scripts out there in circulation right now, and you're in a race to have the best one and the one that's situated in a way that it can get made.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
Like they're really, I mean, it's just amazing how many, especially I know just from going through periods where I'm reading 4 and 5 scripts a day. Not actually, I've never read 5 scripts in a day. That's exaggeration, but like, but maybe 3. They're definitely sending 5 to me a day. Like, and you're parsing through it all. It's amazing how much you're bumping into the same ideas reorganized in different ways with different characters. It's combinations of the same stuff over and over.
Especially when you work
in genre.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. Because there is only so many things you can do. So it's like, there's going to be only so many different, you know, it's zombies, but this time, blah, blah, blah.
And, you know, it also has to be simple enough to have like a sexy hook. That's the elevator pitch. So it's like, because that's what is going to sell, and what's going to get made, and that, you know, so not only is there a finite number of ideas, the ideas have to be so small and specific and digestible, even in a script, just to be like, oh, it's the one about blah, blah, blah. That, I mean, and there's a reason for that too, but then it's just like the pool even narrows even more because there's only combinations. But anyway, so I think having connections is important, because I do think a lot of you went to film school.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's a lot of debate about, you know, the important, you know, how useful is film school and blah, blah, blah. But I do think what it is important for is it does build those connections in a natural way. That is genuine friendships, that are actual relationships that you activated, where you were invested in each other's rise, interested in each other's careers, and sort of the people that you meet and interact with and just get to know as human beings all sort of infiltrate the business in different ways at different times, at different levels, and through different paths. So that reconnecting and maintaining those relationships is like, oh, now you have somebody that you can show your good script to, and you're not protective of it and scared of it, but they want to share it, not because, you know, you're going to do something for them, but because they actually like you as a person and actually like your script. And it's like, oh, this is actually good for me. You know, so the idea of networking sometimes it takes on this like sort of sinister and like phony connotation, but when it actually works, it isn't this like give and take trade-off. It's just a mutual investment and a mutual rise. And I think that, you know, certainly Ben, you and I owe a lot to Dave's ascendance, is help our careers immeasurably.
No, I could point out like the 4 or 5, but there's a bunch of them, but people of different ways that like where their momentum or their ambition ended up being a kind of mutually beneficial thing. Because it's like, like we got an agent because a friend of mine from college, a really close friend of mine from film school, was an assistant at an agency. And so she had to talk with other assistants at agencies and had made friends with some of them. And Emerson he got promoted to where he could take on his own clients. And so it's like, when you just happen to have a script that, is liked on the thing, like, it's like, then he's like, oh, do you know any writers? And she's like, oh, I read this great script. Do you want to read it? And that's how it happens. It's like, they like that person does that. And it's like, same thing with like, Nate meeting Dave. It's like, it's good for him to hook us up because it's also good for us if we all, click and do the thing. So it's like networking becomes a natural byproduct of what I think is the hopefully egalitarian aspect of Hollywood in a way, you know what I mean? In that everybody does benefit from each other's success if everybody's trying to help each other and stuff like that, which is not to say that it's necessarily like that all the time, but I think there is a component of
that doesn't mean you roll up at the party and start passing out business cards necessarily and do it in a like really tacky way. Like, I think that's the spin that people put on it sometimes. Like, it really is just like
and that's not going to work.
No one
is going to be like, look at this asshole with the business cards. Like, and people can tell. Like, and I don't want to help people that are used car salesmaning me. I want to help people that are my friends that are talented.
Because there's an army of people that are working their way in different ways. Like everybody's motivated and you have a shared interest and finding ways to get things made. It's like, don't compete too hard with the people that are down there in the trenches with you, because again, you all benefit if somebody, gets lucky or gets a deal or something happens. And we could trace this, I mean, just in the network of people that we've come to know over the years. It's like, the producer, Keith Levine of Night House, and like I met him at Sundance after VHS because he was working for a company and they were hiring people to come in and do a pass on something that never became a movie. And then later when he became a free agent, he reached out and I passed him the Night House script that you guys had given me.
And he had already not hired us for Hellraiser and Halloween, a bunch of other things.
He was at Dimension, and we pitched to him, and we sort of knew him, and he sort of liked us from back then. So then he knew both of us as separate parties, and
we were both coming off of like I made this movie, The Ritual, that Netflix bought. So I was actually meeting him at Toronto, where Ritual was premiering at the same festival that Netflix bought it out of. And I don't know if you guys had already premiered Super Dark Times, which we haven't mentioned, which was your Tribeca movie that got incredible reviews and like everybody loved. And I think, and was definitely like Siren was kind of a B movie horror, I mean, like that's, we knew what we were making, but like Super Dark Times was like, had this, I hesitate to use the word elevated, but like it had this, a prestige veneer to it, and that comes a lot out of your relationship with Kevin Phillips and his taste.
Who had just walked in a minute ago. He was distracting me behind. Kevin is our good friend that lives next door to me. I love mentioning that on these things because it's very funny. He also helped with the lighting for this interview.
So when you get into this thing of having somebody's going to then come in and bet several $1 million on your indie script, it's like it stands on the reputation of what we've all already done before and the slow building relationship that took years and all the forces kind of coming together. And so all that contributes to the vote of confidence of somebody saying, okay, put the money in the account, and then we begin to roll, or, hopefully giving somebody like, Rebecca Hall the confidence to bet on us, who obviously is extremely well admired and established and read your script and fell in love with it for the Night House. And, but then all her people have to come in and vet this whole thing and go, are these guys going to let this go off the rails, or are they for real? Or like, so it's, you build goodwill over time and, until you don't, until you crash the ship into the side of a mountain, which inevitably will happen. But
I mean,
as long as you keep working.
To take it back to the sort of like the idea of like, giving advice on like sort of what someone should do. I mean, I guess it's like, I want to frame it as like, so I did go to film school. I went to the Savannah College of Art and Design, and I graduated with a BFA, which I've never referenced or used in any professional context ever. But like a Bachelor of Fine Arts, in film or whatever, film and television production, I think is what they called it. Luke, you went for a year and dropped out, then you studied English. David, you went to a state school that I believe did you major in communications, or was it a film in media?
I had a film minor. Yeah.
Okay. But it wasn't really they didn't offer a major. Yeah, it's not a film school.
They didn't offer a major, but there's like film studies courses, not much in the way of production. Yeah.
It's a kegs and football school mostly.
Yeah. So you're either at that party or you're rebelling against that party, but that's pretty much either way.
So what I'm getting at here is that like, so not only did none of us go to school in what you would think of as like these like industry feeder schools like USC or UCLA or like AFI at a postgraduate level, and none of us have any familial connections to the business at all. Right. And it's like, so in terms of when we say like, networking and like making connections and having relationships, like that can mean a lot of things at this point, especially now, because when we were coming up, like the internet, I mean, this, like when we were first starting to write scripts together, Luke, like Twitter didn't exist. I mean, this is like this is MySpace era. So like we were like, I was a part of like some kind of like online script, like screenwriter community things where you'd rate, like people would rate each other's scripts and it's supposed to be helpful, but it kind of just becomes a pissing contest among frustrated people. And like,
I didn't like that.
It well, and it was a preface for sort of what the internet's become in a lot of ways for me. But like all that to say that like now there's so much of that stuff, and I don't want to like shit on any part of it, because if you're, you know, in Perry, Georgia or something, you know, it's like, well, maybe you don't have the same kind of community of people around you, but maybe you have to find them, and whether that's in person or online, because Dave, you built a career from being based in Atlanta. And that's a whole separate thing. But it's like in the same way, there's still relationships from that era of your life, in the same way relationships from the film school era, it's like in my life or something, those still become relevant in a way, potentially, right? You know, so I think it's just to say that if you have material that you're really proud of and you don't have some sort of direct access, or you didn't go to film school, or you're past the point where you would ever want to go to film school, you know, for various reasons, I think you have to figure out how to make the most of what you have. And I do think that the internet can actually be a good place, because I have a lot of like really close friends that I have made through Twitter, and that have been part of, you know, our sort of screenwriting community or filmmaking community as well. So I just want to, for the helpful part, I think, I don't know if there's anything else to say.
And I think it's weird because we are all too old to really comment too much on it, but it has never been easier to make content than it is now.
Yeah.
And in a lack of film school, you know, I do wonder what my path would have been. Would I have gotten on it sooner, or honed my craft more, or in different ways, if I had access to an audience via the internet, and I had access to technology that could actually fit an editing equipment?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I had, like, video toaster shit in my high school that I had to like go to the media center and like use this machine for like an hour or two after school to like put wipes and stuff, just to, or to even like cut on frame, you know, just.
Oh yeah.
It was so hard. I was there when we were making videos in high school with like 2 VCRs hooked up to each other. Put my camcorder up to the VCR and I have to edit it.
He taught me how to do that.
I've done it. Yeah.
Luke taught me how to edit movies. That is the thing. When we first met in high school, I mean, this stuff was
having
so
an audio
hard.
splicer to put like the True Lies soundtrack onto a shitty movie that we filmed in my friend's backyard was like, it's, oh my God, you know. So I mean, in some ways that makes the bar really high, to where the shit that I made was just like dumb stuff that seemed really cool and was exciting and gave me confidence. Whereas now the bar is so high that maybe I wouldn't be involved in this stuff at all, because I would have been so shaken. Like, I can't make something like that some of these people can make, you know, some incredibly impressive stuff. But it's better to have something than nothing, for sure. And so, you know, I think Super Dark Times exists because of your relationship with Kevin, but also because Kevin was really, you know, talented as a director. You guys were like working together and formed like a symbiosis. And I think the way the Super Dark Times actually got made and financed as a feature was because Kevin directed a short that was in the flavor of the style of a showcase for this project. To be like, here's a script, here's a short that shows you, here's what the script could sort of look and feel like. And that's what actually got people convinced to be like, oh, we do want to make a movie.
That's a really good point. And I think that goes to another really important thing that I think has something to do with our writing and approach in general, which is like, I mean, there's a million ways to do it. And I know a lot of writers who don't know anything about production and don't know anything about how things actually get made. And if you have good ideas, somebody's going to want to figure out how to get it made, right? So like, it's not our job, but I do think that, like, especially if you're trying to get things to happen for yourself, like if you're going to make any things on your, like, you need to get a good understanding of what is accomplishable at the level that is available to you, and try to push it just a little bit further. Because it's like if you're like a VFX genius like Neil Blomkamp or something, you can make a $5,000 short film and just put all the manpower in of your own time to make the VFX look great, and people will notice it. But most of us don't have like something that's that specifically like applicable about our skill set or something. So it's about understanding what you do have access to and how to aim for the right mark. And I think so for Super Dark Times, like that, because so that Kevin was my roommate and best friend in film school, that we made a lot of stuff together. And then when Luke and I started writing, and like Luke would act and things for us and stuff like that. So when we started writing, it was kind of an obvious thing that Kevin was going to direct something, but he wasn't, again, kind of same as us. He's from Pennsylvania, but same lack of, you know, it wasn't like an obvious thing that everyone was going to give him money to make a movie. So it was like a question of like, not only was this feature script written specifically for him and then developed with him further to make it be something that he felt good about doing on a scale and understandable for what we thought we could get the money, because we knew we wouldn't be able to get $10 million to make that movie. Right. But like Luke's saying, at a certain point in the process, after you fail to get the money a couple times, you go, well, we just sat in the room with the guy that could cut the check and didn't get the check. So how else are we going to tackle this problem? And it was like, well, let's just make a short film. And that was specifically, how do you write a short film that can be filmed and like done in the style, like almost exactly, like if you saw the two next to each other, you would be like, oh yeah, this is exactly the same thing. And that way, when people saw it and it was effective, then we had the feature script. So again, it's like if we had overshot that and it's like, oh, it needs to end with like, the sun exploding. Well, we're never gonna be able to accomplish that. It's gonna look like stupid garbage.
I don't want to like speak for Kevin or anything, but in addition to giving confidence to financiers to be like, oh shit, this guy can shoot, it's also like not a bad thing for the director to have the practice of like, oh, now I am confident. Yeah, I can handle this because I did that. And I think that's the other thing, is the confidence that you get from actually doing it. The confidence you get from finishing a script. Oh, I can. So I can finish another script. I've done it before. The first time you get notes, it's like, Jesus Christ, I don't know if I can do this. And then you get through it. And then it's like, well, I had that experience. So now I'm prepared to have these conversations in a different way, at a different level than before. So the making of a short, or the writing of a short, it's a skill set that can prove to you as much as to other people that you can do it.
I just want to jump in too and just say, like, and on that, as far as the topics of what the short is going to be, or proof of concept, I guess it depends on what the feature idea is, but there is something to be said about like keeping it tethered to your means just a bit, because I've seen too many filmmakers go out and spend 3 years building a short film, saving up all their money, maxing out all their credit cards so that it can compete visually with some of the stuff that's out there. And it's like, at the end of the day, you're still probably going to come in under a typical national commercial, just in terms of like production quality. And and it's like, and people are so inundated with that stuff anyway. It's like nobody's like super impressed by it anyway in the first place. So it's fight the battles you can win. It's like sometimes if you can find a topic or type of content, especially when you're getting started, that reduces just logistical friction. That's not something that's always going to need the 5-ton grip truck and, the entire production apparatus to come in. Then you can do 3 short films, with 3 of your favorite scripts for the price of 1. And the more times you get in there and you do it and you see your own work, come to fruition, the more you're learning from that in a way. And it also forces you to kind of focus on like drama and narrative and character and the stuff that remains very difficult to do even once the money starts flooding in. I mean, where the battle is often lost and won. So
and tends to be, probably where you want to be. I mean, if you're a writer and you're interested in these things, or like that's probably ultimately where your interest lies and what really resonates with you. I mean, maybe not, but it's also the thing that you can't fake and that other people are going to be looking for on an open writing assignment. Is that drama and that that characters. The shit that is free is the shit that not everybody can do, and they won't be able to do no matter how much money and time they have. That's what you have to prove, and that's what you have to hone. And the other stuff, and that can be in service of the other stuff, but.
Well, that does go back to like the misconception, I think, and we've all been there at differing times, but like when you have that one, your dog detective script that you believe so much in, that like the temptation to kind of like, put all your eggs in the one basket or something, just on a sort of personal level, because you do have to feel that way about something for a period of time in order to kind of, for a lot of people, I think, to get yourself to do it. You need to feel like this is so good to motivate yourself to do it. But then you need to just have another thing and another thing and another thing, because even if your dog detective script is like amazing, like Luke said, when the first conversation ever with Emerson Davis, who has been our agent for our entire career now, and he's a good friend and we love him and we trust him so much. The first conversation was, well, what else do you have? Because one good script isn't the basis for a career. I mean, you see it happen sometimes where people maybe do kind of break out with some like singular thing and then have a hard time kind of replicating that in their career to just sort of increasingly diminishing returns, you know, in that sense. I don't know if that's a oxymoron, but like, yeah, you know what I mean? Like, it's the ability to do the job. And I think you have to enjoy it probably if you're going to get to that point. You know, if you hate it, you're not going to, you know, why would you want to keep doing it? So you have to enjoy it, and you have to be able to continually do that. And I think that, you know, I think that there's probably muscles that you train for yourself, right? I mean, some people get it naturally, other people don't. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. No, go ahead, Dave.
Oh, I was just going to say, it made me think about how, I just was wondering if it was worth talking about the history of the Night House script, because Super Dark Times sounds like you kind of, I actually don't know what the length of time was from when you wrote it and when you finally got it financed and you got it made.
About the same.
Roughly on a 5-year cycle.
Yeah, it's usually about 5 years from first draft to production, I think, right?
With most everything. I mean,
yeah.
You don't know about stuff. Siren was a little bit faster.
Yeah,
a little bit faster.
But Siren was also one that's like, it's not happening, and okay, bury that pet in the yard, and then, you know, scratch. Oh, the fucking bed covered in dirt is like, he's at the window. It's like, it's here, it's back. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Like, it just kind of, all of a sudden this is happening. Like, holy shit.
It was a first draft up until like we were 8 weeks out from production or something. Like, it was one draft we never got notes on. The company tanked. You had to leave to go do something else, Dave. And then out of nowhere, there's like another director all of a sudden, our friend, you know, Greg Bishop, that did a good job with the movie, but like just suddenly we're on the phone with this guy and we did no idea what was going on. It's like, hey guys, I'm shooting your movie in like 8 weeks. You want to help me out and make the script easier? And we're like, yes. So we just do free work for like, you know, the whole summer to get this movie written. But like, yeah, I mean, sometimes they go away and they come back like that dramatically. But no, Super Dark Times
was the one, yeah, I mean, that thing is sort of like combining a couple of things that you guys have said, you know, Dave saying, and I was thinking about this just the other day of, and this was the thing that I didn't have that I'm so glad that I had Ben before, was like, you do have to believe you can do it. You do have to believe that it's possible. It also needs to be coupled with, you know, a sense of humility at every step of the way of like, I'm just lucky to be here. You know, I can't believe I'm here. And so I am willing to do these free rewrites for you, Greg, to help make the movie made, because I'm just fucking excited to get a movie made, you know? And so there's a weird like combination of like, you need that. And like you were saying, Ben, with all of your projects, you do, I'm not telling you to not think that your Dog Detective script is the masterpiece that you think it is, but it might not be the first thing that gets made. So finish that Dog Detective script and put it away, write the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And either the third thing down the line convinces somebody to be like, hey, you're really talented. Like, what do you want to do? Hey, I got this dog script that nobody wanted, but it's just been sitting here and it's ready to go. And then you've bought yourself the power to make it real. And then also you probably have now gotten yourself the power to make it better than it was.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not at all trying to tell anybody who's like starting writing that, you know, that thing you're really passionate about that you're first writing is bullshit and it's never going to get made, but just get through it. No, that thing has value. It may not be the thing. Maybe it doesn't, and maybe it is stupid and it's going to be shady, and then 5 years later you're going to be embarrassed about it. But maybe not. We don't know. And that is a little bit the deal with Night House, which is we did read it, and our reps were very supportive. You know, they thought it was good, but what it didn't do was expand our brand beyond horror. You know, and that was kind of by design on our part, which is, you know, there was Stephanie, which was very difficult to make. Because it was, as you said, Dave, is like 60 pages of a little girl, a 7-year-old girl alone in the house, which seems like that's cheap and easy to do. But also going back to what we're talking about, the actual production of things is you don't have that many hours on set with a 7-year-old girl because they need a tutor. And there are laws that say that they can't work these long hours. So it was the hardest thing to do in some ways. And then, of course, the performance of a 7-year-old. Yeah. Can that carry a movie for an hour? Maybe, if you find the fucking genius actor. So Night House was, can we just do that again, but like with a woman, and like a middle-aged woman to be alone in the house, and like, you know, then that will be, we're doing our part to like, you know, give an actress a great role and blah blah blah. But and this was going back again to what Dave was saying in terms of the evolution of horror. There wasn't a Get Out. There wasn't there wasn't an A24. So the idea of these sort of artisanal, like art housey horror things, that wasn't really a thing yet. And the auteur in that way of like indie horror being sort of art housey. And so we were 5 years ahead of the curve there. And so it was a thing that we wrote, and it kind of got shelved. And when we'd have meetings where people said, what's the thing you have that nobody wants to make? We would trot that out. And that did get attention.
Yeah.
And there were various versions of that tried to Voltron together that didn't happen until,
the right timing.
The right timing. The right people where, Dave has now made the ritual. Now he has power. And now he can read our scripts and like our scripts. And together we can Voltron up and actually make it happen. So the Night House path is crazy, but it's also in some ways the culmination of everything that we've been talking about. And if all these different aspects of what we've been talking about, from connections to, confidence to, all these things, and I still can't.
I should also say, like, in the long journey of the script traveling, it's like even by the time you found producers and you found financiers and you found the actors and you've got the movie in the can, you've cut the film, it still doesn't have a home. Like, these are both independent films. You're not being hired by a company that has a production distribution strategy. So you become reliant on the film festivals. So the Russian roulette of the whole thing is like, if you don't land a spot at a major festival, it's a little insane. And I sometimes don't know, like, what's the backup plan if we can't sell this and, premiere it somewhere where people will pay attention. And the answer is, like, there isn't one. So, it's kind of a miracle when it works. And I think that's why the more you hang around people that make movies, humility does tend to set in, because it's just so hard to make a movie. And it's just so close to impossible to even get it to a place where people can see it, that you're like, how did this even happen necessarily? So, and it's obviously a lot of luck and a lot of timing and everything else. So I'm curious if, like, I can shift gears a little bit because we have about 20 minutes.
Please.
Like, can you guys, so now you've gotten your original work produced. There's more original work down the road that you guys will do. You've got relationships with many companies, many directors, you guys, I think currently right now you have, you don't have to go through the whole list, but I just know off the top of my head, it's like, I know you got like several studio movies. I know we have a thing that we're doing at Netflix. It's like the Hellraiser thing that we're doing together. We have, you guys have a bunch more. You're now at the place where you're tackling franchises, you're tackling adaptations, you're tackling, projects that already have momentum that you're hired to come on and do. Can we get into a little bit working with other people, producers, directors, studios?
Yeah, that's good.
Like, what your experience is with all of that?
I think that one of the things, just since we're talking sort of in like a kind of career retrospective kind of way, I think that these relationships are probably, operate similar to any other kind of social circle, in the sense that, like, like if you're like, when you started in a new school, like every person you meet, you're like, oh, is this going to be my new best friend? Like, it's like you don't really know that until you kind of learn it through experience. And so the guy that was really nice to you on the first day that ends up being mean to you, 2 weeks later, and you're like, well, I guess that guy's not my friend. It's like, you'll go to a general meeting and you'll think, wow, this producer really liked my work and he's so nice and he thinks that I should be writing big movies and I'm gonna do this free development for him. And then you exhaust yourself, and then you realize that maybe that person was kind of being disingenuous, and maybe you don't trust them in the future, and you sort of slowly, hopefully, develop your sense of and it's not a judgment thing. It's not like these are bad people and these are good people, because somebody that you don't click with might a year later have the best movie that you've ever seen, and they were one of the producers on, and you're like, shit, well, maybe
they might be talented, and they also might be like, well, who are they working for? Because like a lot of times people in the general meetings with you, the executives and producers or whoever, like, they're working for somebody else, and sometimes what the negative stuff that you're getting is they're scared of that guy. I gotta please this guy, so I know, like, I remember being in pitches, and it's like, let me stop you right there. The boss isn't gonna like that. And it's like, whoa, that's a shitty thing to do. But it's like, I get, like, you're part of a machine too, and sometimes it's you, and sometimes it's something else.
And that's where it's like the relationships that it's the number of times this has happened is it's becoming kind of ridiculous, and this is why it's a good lesson, is that you've got to think about all those factors when you're interfacing with somebody, like Luke's saying, because sometimes the guy who's the low level guy at a shitty company, but you got along with him, that person's not going to stay at a shitty company if they can help it. And so, like, a lot of our really good relationships in that sort of way come from people who we met when they were at a bad job and then they got a really good job. And they are then incentivized to bring new people into that context. And then if they liked you, they want to bring you with them. And that's, I mean, we mentioned Keith Levine, and that's very much the story there. You know, he was working for a famously difficult producer and was unable to have any kind of autonomy of his own personality wise. So we didn't really have enough of a sense of like what his tastes were until he got a better job. And suddenly it's like, oh yeah, this guy, we really do click with him. And we've now, you know, we're making our second movie with him and it's great. And so it's like, I think you have to be sharp in your ability to, in your communication skills and in your observation skills. You need to be confident but humble, because you have to be able to defend your ideas without, you know, biting everyone's head off. And but you also don't want to be just like a whipped dog that just does whatever anybody says, because that's not going to be, you have to do good work within all this.
Yeah. You got to be honest to yourself and honest to the people that you're working with, and honest without being a shit, either to yourself or to the people that you're working with.
Yeah, you definitely just have to find your own particular brand of non-abrasive honesty, because you, to your point before, like, you never know who somebody's serving, you never know what the level boss is above them. So you're often getting lots of different messages that are coming down, and you can't see the bureaucratic layer cake that's influencing it necessarily. And so, especially when you have like several projects going at once, trying to parse through all the different motivations that you're sometimes encountering in a single productive day, it's just too much to contend with. So at a certain point, you just have to, like, you know, arbitrate, you know, your own aesthetic, like, desires. Like, this is what I think works for the story, and just keep telling the truth, you know, at all times. Like, how do you guys, like, I know it's a little strange because we're working together, you know, so this is your chance to completely give it to me. But like, so like working with directors, you know, first of all, one question is just, how many passes does it take before a movie becomes a movie? And does that vary quite a bit? And talk about your experience with notes.
Yeah, I think in terms of passes, just don't count. Like, don't count. Like, what? Just
more than you want, than you thought there would be.
Why do it? And then it becomes like, well, what actually constitutes a pass? You know, like,
whenever people say that shit, I don't even, like, when they're like, oh, there was, you know, 30 drafts of the script before I'm like, what does that even mean? I mean, like because like we go through and change dialogue for like a couple different characters and adjust the location. That's not a pass. I don't think that's a draft of the script, but I don't know if other people count it that way. But yeah, I mean, so yes, don't count it, but also
a lot. I mean, it's never done. I mean, we were writing like, you know, ADR stuff for Night House, or like looking at cuts of Night House and trying to think like, how can we still kind of rewrite the movie? You know, and obviously we're not like in the editing room with you doing that stuff, but we had conversations and we were weighing in on stuff of like, what's this? So it's like, you know, we're so excited about Hellraiser, and it's just like, I wish it was done. And it's like, it's not going to be done until the movie is like done. Like, we're going to be rewriting this stuff, you know, the rest of the year. And it's just like, you kind of just have to.
Well, and that's a good connecting point, because I still haven't come up with a term for it, but I think one of the things, for this part of the process and with working with other people, is I do think, and this comes down to the personal honesty thing as well, is like being able to, it's a pick your battles thing, but identifying a priority list of problems that can be solved, and like, you know, sort of when you can solve them. And so like, there are things that you're gonna just fight about the whole time, and that's the stuff that usually comes down to like ADR, is like, is this line this way or this line that way or whatever. And it's like, if you got to learn how to not turn everything into a war, or else it's going to be exhausting, right? It's like, there are things, Dave, where we will get very heated about it because we know that we need to solve it right now. So the next person that reads it with this thing, so that idea comes across and we're clear on it with everybody. But there's other things where we're like, internally knowing that it's going to probably keep changing and we shouldn't exhaust our energy, you know, now. So in the development process, I do think that like, you have to be able to let certain things go, knowing that they're not finished yet and it's okay, you know. And I think it's, Luke, I don't know if that's harder for you because you're more of a perfectionist than I am. We have different temperaments and personalities with work. So I don't know if you can talk about that, about like the difficulty of like feeling like it's good, like we did it, here, the script is great, and then immediately getting notes that say everything sucks. It's like, it's really hard. Yeah. So I don't know, you should talk from that perspective.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, notes fucking suck, but they, you know, I think the deal with the trick with notes is, I mean, there's a couple of things, right? And there's that you probably, if you've spent any time thinking or learning about screenwriting, is the idea of the note behind the note. Whereas sometimes people will give a note and they'll be like, this, I don't like this line, or I don't like, this needs more of that. And what you kind of need to do is like, you don't need to take exactly what they said and change this word to that word. You need to look at it and be like, something about this line is bothering them. Something about this scene isn't working. They're complaining this. They have, in their way that where they're not the writer of the thing who's in this world and immersed in all the time, they've noticed something that isn't right. So you need to think about, why did they not like this line? And you can maybe articulate that better than they can, but that's your job, is to figure out, okay, they gave this note, but there's actually something bigger behind it, and there might be a different way to solve it. And then the other thing, and this is something that Ben talks about a lot, is making sure that you're not assuming the dumbest or worst version of what the person says. Because I've done it. I know that this is good. Somebody could, like, to use a phrase of Dave's, like, lob a grenade into the room, blow up the script. Like, I wasn't ready for this idea. I don't like this idea. This is new. But don't assume that their idea is the dumbest possible version of whatever idea that they said. Yeah. And this is why you have executives preemptively, say, like, okay, dumb idea. And then they give you like a really good idea. It's like, like, awed by like, look, it's don't judge me. Here's a dumb idea, but what if it's this? And it's like, oh shit, that's actually really smart. If you think of the best possible version of that idea. And a little bit tangentially to that, so what I'm having to learn to do a lot with notes, which sometimes feels like, I just cleaned the kitchen, and then the dog comes running in covered in dirt, and just, and like that is the dog covered in mud, shaking off. And getting on that to sort of understanding, finding the best possible version of it, but also making it work for you. It's like, what is a version? How they've given you this note that blows up your scene, and it's not really what you had thought, but how can you take what they're telling you and make it work for you too? What about their idea could be exciting? What's an angle into what they want that is still in line with your vision or your interest for this thing? Because it's oftentimes will be cool, and it might not. Either it will be a lateral move of like, this is just as good as what you had before. Sometimes it'll be better. Sometimes it'll be a little bit worse. But if you're mindful and aware of, what you're trying to say with the movie, what you're wanting the story to be, the characters' priorities and their voices, there probably is a way to do what they're asking on your terms that will please everybody.
Yeah, I think it's that and that does connect to the honesty thing about like being able to understand your own taste and why you like the things you like and why you made the choices you made. Because it's like, like there's movies that I love, that we all love, that have like a lot of creative choices that probably just come down to arbitrary taste things on the director's part. You know what I mean? Like, imagine trying to question Nick Refn about why exactly Gosling needs to wear a fucking scorpion jacket and drive. It's like, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure he's got some answer, but it's like, ultimately that's just something you think is cool. And sometimes that's enough. Sometimes if something's cool, it's enough to stay there. But if you're going to subject yourself to this kind of questioning from people where, a director or a producer or an executive can be like, well, I don't understand. Like, why does he have to eat pasta in this scene? I think that he should eat a hamburger. And it's like, well, if it, like you said, Luke, if it is just a lateral thing, then you learn to sort of not, no, my thing can't change. It's a thing. It's like, you need to know.
It's got to be also like, don't cling to the pasta, cling to something. You again, like you said earlier, Ben, is pick your battles, because you're going to get notes and everything. You need to know which ones actually are important. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like being able to tell people in a respectful way what the intention of something was. And so, and then identifying, like you're saying, Luke, if like they don't like it, it's like, well, figuring out why they don't like it, and then being able to come up with something they do like that still serves the intention of what the thing was supposed to do, which is like a very delicate, and I've certainly joked with both of you guys that there's components of this job that feel like therapy. Like, I think that I view the screenwriter's role, it's not a superiority thing, but I do think it's good to be able to step out of something like that and look at all of these different intentions and motivations going into it. And it doesn't mean, Dave, that I'm always like, listen, Dave, I'm sorry your father didn't love you enough and that's why you don't like this scene. But, it's like, I'm not like, you don't want to cut somebody down using that. But if you can see how, okay, maybe there's something more specific going on in this guy's mind that isn't just your idea sucks. But a lot of people do hear your idea sucks first, and that causes a no, my idea doesn't suck, you suck, or whatever the different fights you get into. And we've all done it. I mean, to each other. But it's like it's like you got to learn how to measure that stuff differently. And I do think for writers, especially like Luke's saying, because we're in this weird subjugated but elevated position within the sort of hierarchy of like above the line politics, it it benefits you to be the more patient person, I think, in general.
It's very, no, you guys, I appreciate, like, you guys, first of all, there's a very diplomatic approach that you guys are describing that you fulfill regularly on a daily basis. But I also like that because we are friends, we can get into the personal weeds a little bit about what we're connecting to and what we're trying to understand. And it's like, and we can parse through the things that are just taste. I mean, I know there are things that there's sometimes from a directorial standpoint, it's just a way I see something or understand something that probably is related to like how I'm encoded in some way. And like I sometimes I hope I'm good enough at times to sort of be coming to you guys and being like, hey, please, this just makes sense to me, and then you're not really making a value judgment about something. And then at the same time, there's things that you guys are coming up with that I don't have an intuitive sensibility to, but I know is good. Like there's lines in Night House that I just, for me, are so left field and fucking awesome and where they come from. And so I'm just like, okay, well, that's great. I just get to wield this. Like I've got an actor who gets it and I can just put a lens on it and just let it be. And it's going to work well for the movie. So sometimes it is kind of, getting into the trenches and like why these things make sense to us, because you do kind of reveal yourself. Like when you spend a lot of time parsing through story with somebody, you're talking about psychology and you're talking about human nature, and it's almost unavoidable. Of course, you are having a different conversation sometimes when you're maybe parsing through this stuff with like an executive at a studio where it is a much more buttoned up suit and tie kind of dialogue, and you are talking about story in a much more kind of formal way.
It's like a code switching thing. It's almost like you need to be able to communicate in different ways with different people, because and this is something I remember like learning. I actually remember specifically learning this from Kevin really early on when we were still making stuff in film school, because we needed to, this is a really short story, but I'll make it as short as I can. Like we needed to film at a gun range in South Carolina, like an actual gun range. So we needed to get this guy to let us film in his business, but also be the armorer for the scenes that we were shooting there, because we needed the actor to fire real guns. And like, so imagine a guy that owns a gun range in South Carolina. If you try to tell this guy about like how cinematic it's going to be and how the story, like this guy doesn't fucking care. And we were trying to convince this guy, and the producer was babbling a bunch of like trying to sound professional. And Kevin just grabbed him and goes, he's like, Dan or whatever the guy's name is. He's like, it's going to be fucking awesome. And the guy was like, I'm in. And it's like, okay, so you need to be able to speak, if your director is a big cinephile, then you want to be dropping those Kurosawa references or those Altman references. And like, you want to be understanding that you're speaking the same creative language. But if you're going to interface with people at the studio level, with executives, or with, the few times that we actually end up in the room with like very powerful people, you got to sort of figure out how to have that conversation too, and be able to speak on that level of those guys, because some of the references you make to directors are going to terrify studio people. Right. It's like if we reference, there's movies that sort of like aren't successful but that get classic level status that you can still safely reference. But like, like when Gaspar Noé has a new movie coming out, you don't want to march into like, New Line or Paramount or something and be like, they already use like a Gaspar Noé version of, it's like, we want that kind of, it's like, no, they're going to look at you like you're an idiot. But obviously talking to directors about those kind of things is different. So I do think that like it comes down to, again, that communication skill and the attempt to be able to trust your instincts on how to deal with people. That's normal stuff in any job, right? But I think that people sometimes forget that just because this is a cool job to have, that you still need those kind of like office skills. You know what I mean? Like I never really had real jobs before, but like I get that that's a kind of natural part of that. And it's not really that different here, even though it's a business that's, we get to make monster movies for a living, but we still have to talk about like business stuff with the business people, So it benefits you to learn as much as you can, I guess is what I'm saying as well.
I just want to say something too, just that I think is really great about our relationship for me is that like, because we're pals, like, and we're friends and we know each other and we call each other all the time, just talk about other aspects of things that we're interested in, or we'll just like rant about the current movie and try and see where we all align on it and stuff. Is like, you know, that there isn't a perceived, there's no hierarchy to our relationship. I know that sounds like a ridiculous thing to say, but when you go and make a movie, it's almost like everybody has to impose a hierarchy to kind of get things done in some way, like particularly on set. It's just like, you can't parse through everything. So set becomes relatively militaristic. And it's like, I know from a directorial point of view, sometimes I got to make a call and I know like there's a chance 4 out of 5 people on set are like, what the fuck is he doing? You know? And like, I just got to go for it because I've got something going on in my head. We don't have time to find out, you know, what all the other paths are. But I know it's the same with like the keys that you have, and especially with writers. And again, this seems so obvious, but like one of the things I love is that you guys will hold me accountable. You know, it's it's not just that the director gives notes and then people go and they execute them necessarily. It's like, I expect if I'm on the wrong path that I'm going to get a call from one of you guys out of the blue and you be like, I think this is fucking wrong, you know, and we're going to fight through it in some ways. And I don't know if that's obviously the relationship would be different on every job you're on necessarily, but like, maybe you've worked with directors where that's not the case or something, but
I mean, yeah, I don't want to,
or you will. Yeah.
Hopefully not.
You are, I think that you're my understanding is you're a much more generous and collaborative director than is the norm.
I would say so.
Be my guess. And that you do allot us a degree of respect that I don't necessarily expect every time. So for whatever that's worth, and Kevin as well.
Well, how do you guys deal with, maybe it's not director, but maybe it's producer or studio. Like, how do you fight back when the information is when you're hearing something that you can't get behind? You know, like, do you find that you're asserting yourself quite a bit? Do you feel, do you sometimes have to strategize and do the savvy play of like, wait for the right time? Do you feel like that's something that you run into a lot?
Yes.
Yeah.
Strategizing. Yeah. Occasionally putting in ringers of like, you know, like, look, I know they're going to cut this scene, but like give them the obvious, you know, like I think, you know, the stories of Tarantino putting so much blood, you know, like gratuitously shooting an exploding head because he knows the MPAA is going to be like, you got to cut this down. And when you cut down the 5 seconds of head exploding to 2, the 2 is all you wanted, you know? So there's shit like that you got to do to some extent. Yeah. But also it just goes back to what Ben is saying about like knowing who you're talking to. Cause there's some directors where it's like, they're not, you could dig in your heels all you want. It's not going to work. And even sometimes with you, David, I'll know. And I'll tell Ben, it's like, this is what Dave wants. It's futile to fight back on this. This is what he's after. We have to get on board and get into this idea because I can tell like this is what he wants. And there, so sometimes it's like an idea that somebody's passionate about. Sometimes it's a ego or position where it's like, look, we're not going to question this person. They're telling us what to do. We have to do it. And all arguing is going to do is cause problems or, you know, whatever, earn a reputation, a mark of like, oh, they're difficult. So you got to just feel everybody out. And it's like, well, I know that I can push back on you, Dave, if there's like an idea. It's like, no, I think I can convince him. I'm going to tell him. You know, and then with other people, if it's like, I'm not going to convince him, then why fight? Sure. Why make it hard for everybody? You have to kind of feel it out.
And if you're truly at odds with something, I mean, like, this is going to sound very pessimistic, I guess, but like, I do think that we've gotten better at walking away when we need to, and that's like a thing that doesn't get talked about much because it's especially when you're trying to get into the business or when you're first getting into it, like you're trying to grab at every fucking life raft that's, you know, I mean, we wrote pre-WGA, we wrote scripts for, you know, $5,000, you know, that we spent just as much time on as an assignment we get, you know, now at a studio level with, you know, guild representation and all the stuff that, like, you know, gets us paid fairly. It's like, yeah, you know, you take what you can get. And I think, I don't know, I lost my train of thought there.
Yeah, no, that's a great point.
It's tricky, you know, I mean, you know, God forbid, and it's been rare that we've been in some sort of like moral situation, which is like,
no, very, very rare.
Comfortable writing this, you know, and like then we've pushed back and be like, look, this is sending the wrong message for this reason or that reason, or like I'm not gonna.
Which is the best part about current Hollywood is that you can win arguments much more easily than you ever used to. Is like when we very first got started, like the arguments that we would get into when we wanted to have like, I mean, this sounds insane now, and it's not bragging, it's just a point of comparison. Like we had producers straight up tell us in pitches, like, you cannot make this movie with a female lead. There's no women that we can sell foreign to get the financing for this level of budget. And it's just like, I think you're wrong. I think you can do that. I think you're pretending there's not an audience for this when there is. And the fact that you're not trying is cowardly. But again, you don't say all that to them because if you're trying to get your first job, but it's like now you can call people on that stuff. And I think like it's a nice part of the social pressure that's happened with that people back down off of most of the truly repugnant things they would ask you to do at this point. Like that's less common because everybody doesn't want to be seen as being problematic or something. I don't know if that's like too inside baseball to say, but I think that the business is better for being able to stand up for yourself now in that sense.
But those occasions are rare, and usually if you do bring it up, yeah, people will listen, and we've been lucky. Yeah. There hasn't been too much of that, you know, but yeah, I mean, obviously when you're first entering, you do kind of have to do what people say. And you know, at the end of the day, look, as much as I consider myself an artist, it is a job. And so if the director or the producer is telling me to do something, they're paying me to do what they say
100%.
at a certain point. And so
yeah, they're not paying you to write, they're paying you to take notes. You can push back
and haw and say, here's all the reasons why.
Yeah.
That's why that skill of just, is there some way I can make this work for me? And 9 times out of 10, you can come up with something that you can live with. And then, you know, for that one time, it's just like, well, I guess we're going to do a stupid dream sequence scare because it's what they want. And I think it messes with my mythology, but we're putting it in.
Well, but it's like, I think we have so many different metaphors. And I can't remember how all the cooking ones work, Luke, but we always talk about like, you know, it's like grocery shopping. Like, you know, it's like when we're giving these like outlines and stuff to a studio or whatever, it's like, we're telling you all the things that we're going to put in this dish that we're making you. And it's like, if somebody's going to come up with, you know, oh, you know, it's like, but I'm trying to remember all the comparisons, Luke. It's like, oh, we're making Mexican food, but then like they come back with some like chili oil that they got from like a weird Oriental grocery store. And they're like, use this. And it's like, I don't know what the fuck. And then so you come up with some sort of Asian Mexican fusion dish. I mean, it's like that is how innovation happens, is that you having to fit discordant things into your thing can make for the, you know, interesting flavor that makes something unique. So like some of the best decisions that we've made creatively in stories came from internalizing somebody's literally bad note into something we liked. I mean, that's like the Stephanie development, you know, I mean, we're not going to name any names or anything like that, but it's like, we got notes that we didn't like from somebody who was involved at one point, and we found solutions we did like, and that became our favorite version of the script, even though that person didn't like what we did. So it was like the whole other, you know, thing like that. But I do think that, like, again, being humble enough to admit that no matter how smart you are, no matter how great your ideas are, it doesn't mean you've thought of every single thing that's going to make something interesting. And so you might, I mean, the best idea might come from an actor, it might come from an executive, it might come from a grip. I mean, you have no idea, you know? So it's like, you'd be foolish to not take people seriously and try it. But, you know, again, if you get to the point where, like, I mean, we've had projects we've been on for years, and at a certain point, you know, maybe you do have to go, if it's not clicking and everything you're doing isn't satisfying them and they're not happy with whatever, like, you can quit things or you'll get fired. I mean, that happens too. And, you know, I mean, you learn to get thick skin with that. I mean, everybody, I mean, having thick skin is such like a cliche thing to be like, you know, you want to be in this business, you better toughen up, kid. It's like, but to some degree it happens naturally unless you're fighting against it, because you will be disappointed. You will get fired. You will lose jobs. You will, you know.
Toughen up. But here's the thing, man, it's Bruce Lee. You just got to be water rather than be hard. They throw a note at you, be water, and you can crash, but you got to move with what they're throwing at you. And that liquid malleability, but while maintaining your perspective and your grace, is like, that's the game.
Well, and none of the three of us are terribly relaxed people. I mean, I think we all have various anxiety disorders of different kinds and paranoid thinking and stuff like that. So it's like, it's not to say that like it doesn't feel like absolutely crushing constantly, and that like there's not always this sense of like, oh, you know, this person doesn't like my ideas because of this personal thing or this political, you know, it's like there's all these like different ways that you can kind of work yourself up. But I think that you do have to find some way to be water ultimately, Luke. I think you're right. I think that is like, that's got to be the gestalt goal of your sort of professional behavior, even if at moments you absolutely let yourself, I mean, you know, we've all done it where we've called either all three of us, or okay, Dave's getting it from me today, call Dave and just yell at him about, not at him, but just, you know, rant and rave, or Luke gets pissed and calls me. But it's like, you're gonna have a roller coaster of things, but ultimately you want to be known as professional and reliable and additive to a conversation. You know, that at the end of the day, this is a relationship, a business of relationship.
Like, yeah, you pitch a fit, I don't want to do this note. Well, congratulations. Maybe you won that battle and you don't have to do that note, but that also means you just lost like 5 jobs, because that person that you said no to in that rude way just told 5 people, hey, have you ever worked with so-and-so? Oh, he's kind of a nightmare. Like, you don't want to do that. So it's like, well, congratulations. You got that line in that script in the movie that's never going to get made.
It is true, and it affects all of us, that the telephone game inside the industry goes a long way. The first time you start to work with somebody, everybody picks up the phone and calls all their other collaborators and everybody. And then there's a weird code between people in your same profession. You know, I get a call from a director that's like, wants to ask me about somebody. Sometimes it's somebody that I really like, I really care about, I really want to succeed, but given what they're asking, it's like, there's now something sacred of like, do I give a recommendation in this circumstance, knowing what I know, you know? And so again, it's good to be honest in those moments sometimes. And so, yeah, I mean, but if you're good natured, and I think it's the only thing I just add to everything that you guys said, is just, I think you can be passionate, you can have outbursts, at least I'm not afraid of there being arguments and getting into the weeds and stuff and butting heads and being tough on one another and pushing one another. And it's like, I like that sort of creative exchange, but as long as there's just always respect at the bottom of it, you know, and like, that's, you know, you're never disrespecting someone, then I find that you can get involved and you don't have to be so postured that you're sort of robbing yourself of your true feelings about something.
I think that's huge. I think the only times that I've ever really gotten angry has been from either because the person didn't respect me, or because at the end of the day I didn't respect them. Like the anytime things have gotten real nasty there has been some disparity with the level of respect.
Yeah, and that's you can be angry. You want to be angry on the same level.
Yeah,
you know, you don't want, you know, anger down would be content.
And you don't want your anger
up as resentment. That shit's toxic.
Yeah, and when it's you're only angry because you're defensive here, then it's not, you know, it has no value. It's anger that's misdirected.
So steering back towards the positives, so we should wrap up, but like, I'm just curious, actually, I don't know the answer to this. I mean, like, we talked a little bit about it, but like, here you guys got, you know, 2 movies that are probably going to go this year. And like, what's next? Like, is there something that specifically that you want to do, or that you're not doing, or not to reveal your secret master plan necessarily, but like, how do you guys, what's your 5-year plan?
I mean, I think like we said at the beginning about original ideas versus, you know, I mean, I love studio assignments. I mean, the joke that I've made a bunch of times is that, and because I am ADD, so I didn't know, I used to just say it as a joke, but I am very ADD. So having somebody show up with a new idea, so like getting an email that's like, hey, read this comic book and see what you guys think. Like, sometimes that's just like absolute, you know, catnip for me. And I'm just like so excited. You know, but at the end of the day, the satisfaction, like especially with Night House and Super Dark Times, because those were both movies that, like you said, were originals, that in both cases we you know, worked with the director that we wanted to work with, that we intended to work with, even if it took a long time to get there. And you know, we got to some degree pick the producers on both those projects as well. And so like it's the satisfaction of having started something, staying on it for the duration, feeling like you made it with this group of people and that it's what you wanted, even if it means it changed based on someone else's vision. That's incredibly satisfying. And I think that we do owe it to ourselves to probably spend more time with that and less time, you know, reading all the different shit that we get sent and stuff. So I think that, and that could mean, you know, creating more TV content as well. I think that, like, in terms of like finding what we want to do, you know.
I'm
we haven't
really
done much of that
in expanding, because it's, you know, it's weird that I studied British literature and I was a high school teacher, and you know, some of the greatest success we've had has been the more nuanced things, but in my heart and soul, I'm like just a giant nerd. So the idea of being able to expand, like to sequelize something, to write a sequel to a movie that we've written and build out a universe, or to work on a television show when it becomes like serialized storytelling, and I get to sort of professionally just engage through the other side of the looking glass with the sort of serialized like nerd content creation that I absorbed so enthusiastically growing up and still to this day is super exciting. I mean, that's why getting to do Hellraiser has been such a dream, is because I'm playing with somebody else's toys, which is sometimes my favorite thing to do, which is just understand why I love something and kind of add to it. So whether that's through, you know, producing or getting more into television where there is a group effort and there is an idea of not going beyond 90 minutes and actually going into, I want to live with this character for years and years and years, and not just this version of the character because we spend 5 years trying to make this one story, but actually starting a story, creating a character in a world that I love, and being able to do that is really kind of the dream for me. But
so there's a lot. Yeah. So it's, I mean, more of everything is good, I think, for us. And I think also, I think whether it is original things or somebody else's toys, as it were, I think continually finding the places in ourselves as to what is truly most interesting, because you watch a lot of stuff. I mean, if you make movies, you watch a lot of movies. We like a lot of different kinds of movies, and Luke and I have an interesting Venn diagram of like overlapping tastes and things that we don't agree on and stuff like that, and that's kind of fun too. But I think, like, you know, like there's that part of you that kind of wants to just like go back in time to what you thought about movies or what excited you when you were younger, and kind of go like, well, what have I not made that like 15-year-old me would really love, you know, in whether that's, you know, I mean, like you know, our mutual acquaintance Adam Wingard just had his big movie come out, his King Kong Godzilla movie, and seeing the announcement that he's doing Thundercats was like so fucking confusing. And then I read like one paragraph of that interview he gave in Deadline, and I need to read the whole thing, but like hearing him talk about how Thundercats was like this thing he's been wanting to make as like a big studio movie since he was like a teenager made me so happy, because I'm like, well, fuck yeah, like bring this on, because I think that that's where there's like that thing where like you get Hollywood success and suddenly like all movies look like a big, like a buffet restaurant or something, where you're like, yeah, I'm successful, I'd like to do a political thriller. Oh, you know what, horror has always been something I've kind of liked, I want to do a horror movie. And like, if you're Martin Scorsese, that's fucking great. But you see it sometimes where you see movies where you're like, I don't think the person who made this on any level, like whether it was the writers or the directors or the producers, like, I don't know if they really liked this movie, or if they were making this for the right reasons. You know, horror movies make a lot of money, so a lot of people got into horror movies after Paranormal Activity, but that meant a lot of people that didn't really know about it were doing it. And I'm not a snob about that stuff by any means, but I do think that you have to love the things you're doing in the right way.
Yeah.
You know?
Right on. Well, guys, this has been great. Is there anything else you want to say? Anything? I think we covered some pretty good ground.
No, I mean, yeah, no. Find the things you love and find how to pursue them in the most informed and enthusiastic and realistic. But be realistic and also dream. I don't know, like do both somehow.
Yeah,
I think that's a good thing to end on. So, all right, gents. Thank you for this.
Thanks
for having us.
All right.
Always a pleasure. Yeah.
I'm sure I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Yeah. See you, dude.
Peace.
Bye, everyone.